For as long as I can remember, a print of an abstract painting has hung in my grandmother's kitchen. I never really liked the picture. She bought the print in the late 80s. It's already a bit faded, but the original picture actually looks like this. I also didn't understand what appealed to people about these kind of paintings. So I asked her. She said she liked the precise geometric shapes. It had something of a technical drawing about it. But the artist was actually trying to convey something entirely different. Have you ever wondered what it would be like if you could hear colors and smell shapes? It sounds crazy, right? But imagine an artist wanting to express exactly that in his work. This video is about Wassily Kandinsky, an artist who made the seemingly invisible visible and the unheard audible. Kandinsky is considered one of the pioneers of abstract art. But how are his paintings to be understood, and what makes them so special? It's not just the mere absence of representational motives. His art was rather the result of his search for the spiritual in art, as he called it himself. He didn't just want to depict the world as he saw it, but as he felt it, and with all his senses. Kandinsky is said to have been a synesthete. This means his senses are linked in a special way. He could not only see colors, but also hear or even feel them. Imagine a vibrant yellow having the sound of a trumpet for you, while a deep blue would sound like a warm cello. Kandinsky described the colors and shapes he used in precisely this way. This ability to perceive the world with multiple senses was the driving force behind his artistic development. He wanted to take viewers of his paintings on a journey of the senses, letting them hear color symphonies and feel form sounds. The idea that art doesn't just appeal to the eye but touches the soul is central for Kandinsky. In 1911, he wrote his book concerning the spiritual in art, a manifesto that declared abstraction not just a style, but a spiritual act. He saw art as a means to make the hidden vibration of the soul visible.
In our soul there is a fissure, and when one manages to touch it, it resonates like a precious vase which was found in the depth of the earth and has a crack. However, today's spectators are rarely capable of such vibrations. They seek in a work of art either a pure imitation of nature that can serve practical purposes, portray in the usual sense and the like, or an imitation of nature that contains a certain interpretation, impressionistic painting, or finally, states of mind disguised in natural forms, which one calls mood. All of these forms, if truly artistic, fulfill their purpose and provide, even in the first case, spiritual nourishment, but especially in the third case, where the spectator finds the resonance in their soul.
It wasn't as if he could only paint abstractly. His early works are indeed representational. For him, however, it was a logical consequence to turn away from representational painting because material objects, in his opinion, only distracted from the actual inner message. This is where he broke new ground. Many other artists at the same time were still debating how best to depict the world realistically or at least distort it. Even the famous Picasso, in his Cubist phase from 1907 onwards, still painted people or objects. Kandinsky, however, completely rejected the representational depiction of objects. Funnily enough, at this time, he was the chairman of an artists' association that urged him to paint works that were more comprehensible. They probably didn't really understand his abstract paintings either. Thereupon, he resigned as chairman and founded a new artists' club, Der Blaue Reiter, or the Blue Rider. It's actually quite a funny story, but maybe I'll make a separate video about that sometime. But back to hearing colors. Let's look, for example, at one of his masterpieces, Composition VIII from 1923. At first glance, you might see a wild jumble of geometric shapes, lines, and colors. But try to see the painting not as a collection of shapes, but as a kind of orchestra. You see sharp angles, circles, triangles, straight and curved lines, extending over a light background. These elements are not randomly placed. Kandinsky carefully considered how each line, each shape, and each color interacts to create a particular mood or emotion. The circles in Composition VIII are often interpreted as planets and stand for cosmic harmony. The straight lines and sharp angles, in turn, create tension and dynamics. It's almost as if you're looking at a sheet of music, where each shape is a note and each color is an instrument. The painting is essentially a carefully choreographed visual symphony. Kandinsky had an almost scientific approach to composition. He examined very closely the effect of elements such as points, lines, and planes. He even wrote a book about this in 1926. He was convinced that every form and every color possesses its own soul and inner sound. Blue, for him, often stood for tranquility and spirituality, yellow for a warm but almost aggressive attitude, and red for passion and strength. But here's what's special. Composition VIII is a work from his later Bauhaus period. After returning to Russia during World War I, he came to the Bauhaus in Weimar in 1922, which was, in short, an art school where he developed a new, more rational and geometric phase of his abstraction. This is an important turning point in his artistic career. His early abstract works, which he often called improvisations and impressions, were freer, more expressive, and more spontaneous. They aroused directly from his inner feelings. Composition VIII, however, shows a more conscious and structured approach. The compositions were, for him, the most carefully produced works. He himself perceived them as pedantically examined and elaborated. This means that he consciously placed each element to achieve a precise effect. It wasn't just a random play with forms, but constructing entire stories from individual words. He even developed a kind of grammar to guide himself and not get lost in non-objectivity. Comparing his compositions and improvisations is like comparing classical music and a jazz musician's jam session. One is literally orchestrated and the other one is more spontaneous. Let's look at Yellow, Red, Blue from 1925, also a product of his Bauhaus period. The title already reveals the dominant colors and, at the same time, the structure of the painting, which is built from left to right. On the left side, bright yellow and angular geometric shapes dominate, radiating an intrusive, almost aggressive energy. Imagine hearing shrill, high-pitched sounds accompanying this. Then, in the middle, a strong red appears, symbolizing passion and a certain grounding. And finally, on the right side, you find a deep blue that conveys vastness, tranquility, and spirituality, perhaps like a long, deep chord. Kandinsky himself saw this work as a kind of musical composition. He spoke of the symphony of colors, and you can almost feel it when you look at it. The sharp angles and corners on the left side could represent dissonances, while the softer, rounder forms and the deep blue of the right side creates harmonious sounds. The tension between these different elements is what makes the painting so vibrant. It is a play between opposites, light and dark, sharp and soft, earthly and spiritual. But why is this so special? Because with Yellow, Red, Blue, Kandinsky doesn't just create a pretty picture. He invites you to feel into the painting and into yourself. He urges you to go beyond mere seeing and discover your own inner reaction to colors and forms. Art should not just be a mirror of the outer world, but a window to the inner world of the artist and the viewer. This is what makes Kandinsky's art so distinctive. For Kandinsky, art no longer has to depict reality, but can simply convey pure emotions, moods, and spirituality. His theoretical considerations were just as important as his practical painting. He was not only a painter, but also a thinker and a teacher. At Bauhaus, he conveyed his ideas about the psychological effect of colors and forms. He believed that art has the ability to touch and transform the human soul, similar to music. This connection to music was always present for him. He assigned colors to specific sounds and spoke of color sounds and color symphonies. For him, painting was like a sheet of music, to be read by the eyes and heard by the soul. This might sound a bit flowery, but it expresses Kandinsky's intention quite well. This approach led to a new kind of art that no longer merely imitated the external world, but created its own autonomous reality. He paved the way for countless artists who came after him and significantly influenced the development of modern art. Kandinsky's influence extends far beyond painting. His thoughts on the interaction of form and content, on the emotional impact of colors, and on the role of the artist as a spiritual pioneer have inspired generations of artists and theorists. If you see an abstract painting today whose forms and colors evoke an inexplicable reaction in you, remember that Kandinsky was one of the first to systematically tread this path. He showed us that art is not just something to look at, but something to experience with all our senses. And that makes him one of the most outstanding artists of the 20th century. And that's why it's art.